Let's take a look at some quick shortcuts that every editor should know while they're working in a timeline. For our first keyboard shortcut, let's talk a little bit about the D key. The D key can be used to select clips underneath the playhead, and this works according to track targeting. So you can position your playhead, press D, and it will select the clip. This allows you to perform a number of different useful operations. In order to adjust properties inside of the effects control panel, such as scale, motion, or effects parameters, a clip needs to be selected. So this is a really useful keyboard shortcut that keeps things a bit more keyboard oriented. Setting in and out points is such a common task inside of Premiere Pro, inside of any nonlinear editor. If you find yourself manually moving to the head or the tail of a clip in order to set an in or an out point, you're performing a lot of unnecessary extra steps. What you want to do is you want to use the X key, and the X key will mark the in and the out point for clips underneath the playhead. And this works according to track targeting. So make sure you pay attention to how your track targeting is set when you're using this keyboard shortcut. Quite often, while editing, we want to remove in and out points that we've set in our project. To do this, we can use the default keyboard shortcut, Option X. This keyboard shortcut is definitely the quickest and cleanest way to clear in and out points, whether you're working in the timeline or you're working inside of the source monitor. So remember D to select clips under the playhead, X to set in and out points, and Option X to clear them. All right, let's move on and talk about the bracket keys. These are a couple more of my very favorite keyboard shortcuts, and these are located just to the right of the P key on your keyboard. I will use the D key to select the clip underneath the playhead, and then I will double click on the audio track header so we can see our waveforms a little bit better. At this point, I can use the right bracket key to bump up my audio levels by 1 decibel, or I can reduce them by pressing the left bracket key. This makes it really easy to jump around to different portions of a timeline to match the audio levels between clips. It's just nice to be able to jump around and bump various clips by 1, 2, or 3 decibels to keep the dialogue consistent and to match the volume between sources. This also helps us avoid the need to constantly switch back and forth with the pen tool or right-click to access the audio gain in the context menu. In several of our videos, we've talked about the concept of zooming out on a timeline, selecting large chunks of the timeline, and moving these around in order to make room to edit. Sometimes you don't get all your assets selected, and this can lead to sync issues and other problems. A better technique is to press the A key to select the track forward tool. Even if you're zoomed in pretty far into your timeline, you can know that the track forward tool is going to select everything to the right, and this is a quick and easy way to shift everything over to make some room. To switch back to the standard selection tool, just press the V key. Okay, here is another new addition that has been recently added in Premiere in the last year or two. What we can do is we can use the keyboard shortcut Shift-B to automatically create a bin. If we're working inside of our project and we've imported a number of different clips, what I can do is I can select those clips and I can press Shift-B. And what that will do is that will automatically place them inside a bin, and it's ready for me to give it a name. This is a quick and direct action, and we don't have to go in and manually create a bin and then select a range of clips and drag them into the bin. We're doing this quite often, so it's nice to reduce these steps and give us this quick, expedited way to organize all of our media into bins. The Option or the Alt key on Windows is an absolute game changer. And if I had to pick one modifier or one key on the keyboard that I use more than any other inside of Premiere Pro, it would be the Option key. For that reason, I created a dedicated video where I talk about a bunch of different things that you can use the Option key for. So if you have interest in some of those things, I would highly recommend it. It's a short video and there's a lot of good stuff in there. As editors, we're constantly working with various panels to perform different actions inside of Premiere Pro. Finding and accessing all of these individual panels in a quick and instant way really does improve the entire process of editing. In the past, I've found myself relying on the window menu in order to track down and open different panels for different purposes. I'm constantly tracking down the project panel in order to locate media or to open various sequences. Another scenario may be to track down particular effects that I want to apply to my clips. You may have noticed that my effects panel is already open. It's down in the tab group at the bottom left, but it's hard to keep track of where you've left all of your different panels. And so tracking these things down can be an ongoing issue. So now that we have our effects panel open, let's say we want to apply an effect to one of the clips in our timeline. And notice once I apply that effect, I don't have immediate access to the effects controls panel where I may want to make additional adjustments. So we could find ourselves going back to the window menu to try to open the effects control panel. What we're getting at here is that we want to use the built-in keyboard shortcuts in order to directly access these panels. So let's do that. The keyboard shortcuts Shift 1 through 9 are going to open your major panels inside of Premiere Pro. So for example, if we press Shift 1, this is going to open the project panel, or it's going to bring the project panel forward if it's already open. Now we're ready to track down media in our project or import more media if we'd like to. Press Shift 3 to open your timeline panel. If you have multiple timelines open, Shift 3 will toggle between the various sequences. At this point, we can use the keyboard shortcut D to select a clip underneath the playhead, and then we can press Shift 5 to open the effects control panel. So this is all entirely keyboard driven, and we can go through and activate the various panels, select a clip, and then we can adjust clip properties. Shift 7 will open the effects panel, so we're ready to search for, locate, and apply effects in our project. The odd numbers are really useful. Shift 1, 3, 5, and 7. Shift 2 will take us directly to the source monitor, and we can move between Shift 2 and Shift 3 when we're bouncing between the source and timeline. Just pulling up these panels, depending on what you want to accomplish, is instant and quick, and definitely something that every editor should be doing. If there are some of these panels that you don't use, set these up so that they'll trigger the panels that you use more often. For example, you might want to set up a different keyboard shortcut to pull up the Lumetri color panel. I think that would be pretty common and useful. Or maybe you want to access the text panel if you're working with captions or text on a regular basis. I set up the Essential Graphics panel because I'm constantly working with Mogerts or even just simple text elements, and being able to pull up that panel instantly is extremely useful. So feel free to customize these the way that makes sense to you. And more importantly, just make sure that you're using all of these on a regular basis, because it really does improve the experience of editing and it makes you faster. There are a million different ways to use labels inside of Premiere Pro, and I find it very interesting to see how different everybody's workflow is inside of Premiere Pro when it comes to labels. Maybe you're just working through clips and you want to tag them with a specific color. Maybe you're using it as an organizational tool. Maybe you're using colors to note clips that are based on a particular theme or a topic or from a specific camera, for example. Everybody uses labels differently, but I think maybe one of the most important tips is to make sure that you have labels mapped to keyboard shortcuts. And the keyboard shortcuts are not mapped by default. What I'll do is I'll go up into the keyboard shortcuts and I'll type in label. And here we can see we have access to all of the different labels inside of Premiere Pro, and I can set up keyboard shortcuts for these labels. I've already gone in and set keyboard shortcuts Option Shift and M for mango, Option Shift P for purple, and Option Shift B for blue. There's nothing set by default. I'll just go up here, Option Shift F for forest. And now I have 4 different labels set. Now when I come back down into my timeline, I can use the D key to select a clip, and I can choose Option Shift F to tag it with a green label, forest, B, blue, or M, mango. Once all of your favorite label colors are nicely mapped to specific keyboard shortcuts, you'll just find these to be more accessible, and you'll find that you'll use them much more in your projects for a variety of different purposes. It makes it easier for creating selects or noting your favorite shots or organizing your content. So make sure you map some of these labels to keyboard shortcuts that make sense for your workflow. Here we have an example project where I helped out a friend of mine and did a bit of the editing and the organization on this project. And you can see that I used the spanned markers to cover or to note some of the major themes of the video. You can see that in this particular section, we're talking about the organization, and you can see that I might have different people that are associated with the organization, and I'll be clumping these clips together and starting to organize them and starting to choose my favorites. You can see down here that I actually had two different cameras. So one of the camera angles, I labeled it green, and the other camera angle was labeled rose. And then as I worked through the clips, there were additional things that I did to organize this content. You can see that I would start to bump up particular tracks that became my favorite. And the way I would do that is I would select the clips and I would use Option up or down to nudge some of my favorite clips up or down a track. I could also use the mango label, which signified to me another level that these were some of my favorite clips and that I wanted to bring particular attention to these. One of the other things, one of the recent enhancements we've made to marker workflows, if you open the marker panel, you can see now that it's very easy to isolate exactly which markers that are in view inside of your sequence just by clicking them over here in the marker panel. And this can also be an extremely effective and easy way to go in and clear specific markers from your project. And of course, this is more and more useful the more complicated your sequences become. So remember, you can go in and sort and use this functionality to clear your markers. We also have this ability to toggle copy paste include sequence markers, and this is actually turned off by default. So if we turn that on and say, for example, we are wanting to move certain sections of our timeline that contain markers, when I copy and then paste those sections, you can see that they will come along, or they will bring the sequence markers along with those clips. And so that makes it easy for you to move sections of your timeline that may already be affiliated with a sequence marker and keep that maintained as you're moving assets between timelines or from one section of a timeline to another. As editors, of course, we're always working with various tracks, working with multiple video or multiple audio tracks. Maybe we want to access keyframes or do something like adjust opacity, or quite often working with audio waveforms are common use cases. This ultimately means that we're regularly resizing tracks, and if you're like me, there have been times when I'm fumbling around with the track dividers trying to get different tracks to be the right size in order to get work done. So let's take a look at some better methods of managing track heights, and we'll take a look at incorporating some useful keyboard shortcuts that make continual adjustments of track heights a bit more efficient and productive. The plus and minus keys, or the hyphen and plus keys, right up to the top right of the keyboard, are extremely useful for zooming in and out of our timeline. I think most of us are probably using these keys on a regular basis. But there are also some useful modifiers that we can use that we can combine with these keys to use for track management. And it's a lot better option than dragging around the dividers between the tracks over to the left. If you use the command key in conjunction with the plus and minus keys, you can see that it will resize all video tracks. If I use the option or the alt key, that will resize all of the audio tracks. Another technique that I use probably more than any other is simply to double click on the track header. And you can see when you double click on the track header, it will expand that particular track so you can work on it. And then I often combine this with the shift, plus and minus keys to expand or collapse all tracks. And this works very well. If you want just a little bit more precision when it comes to dialing your exact track height, you can hover with the mouse over the track header, hold down the option key, and then use the scroll wheel on your mouse to size the track to the exact size that you want. So you definitely do not need to remember every single one of these keyboard shortcuts, but I would recommend that you play around with some of these various options for a few minutes and determine which ones you like the best. And you'll find yourself incorporating these into your regular editing on a more regular basis. And one last little tidbit that I will mention. If you find yourself working on long form projects, say for example, you're working on one sequence for weeks at a time, or you're working on projects that have the same structure, the same format, the same number of tracks, there may be times when you'll actually want to create your own presets for track height. And what you can do is you can save presets for your track heights, and you can assign them to keyboard shortcuts in the keyboard shortcut editor. And then you can very quickly, with keyboard shortcuts, toggle between different presets that are catered towards different tasks. One of the things that we can do is we can reorganize how our track headers are displayed in order to make the names of various tracks more prominent and more accessible. And this is just one of these little things. I think a lot of Avid editors are used to this type of a workflow, and something that's easy enough to do inside of Premiere. Let's take a look. I'm going to press Shift plus in order to see a little bit more of the information that we couldn't see while the track header was collapsed. And you'll notice that we have some icons at the top, and we have the track name in the middle on both the audio and the video tracks. And if I press Shift minus, when I collapse those tracks, I can no longer see the track names. So what we can do is we can go in, we can right click over the track header, and we can choose Customize. Now, in order to make some changes here, you might think you can instantly start modifying this. You want to click Reset Layout. Once you click that button, you can go in and you can remove icons if you don't use them. For example, I use keyboard shortcuts for navigating to previous and next keyframes, and I never ever use those. I'm also going to drag the audio track name up to the top row and move these other icons down onto the middle row. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and now you'll notice that my track names are up at the top of the track header. And if I press Shift minus, I can see my track names. Of course, this would be the same if I also customized the video track names, but I find the audio track names to be much more useful with the type of work that I do. And of course, at this point, you can right click on the track header and you can rename each track header however you'd like. Very easy to label these tracks for music or dialogue or effects. And of course, this makes it easier and nicer when you're passing projects back and forth between people. This makes it a little more obvious where everything is located. And there can also be benefits when you are working on post-production workflows where you're sharing sound with others. Let's talk a little bit about the effects badge. So the effects badge inside of Premiere Pro can provide useful indications as to whether or not a clip has effects applied. And it also gives you the option to access a context menu. So you can right click on this option to display various keyframes. And this is particularly useful if you're adjusting keyframes directly in the timeline. I do most of my work in the effects control panel because I like using that dedicated window. It gives me a little bit more control. And so I don't really find myself using the effects badge a lot. However, there are times when this effects badge can get in the way. You can see if we have a lot of small clips, when I go to right click on a clip, I get the wrong menu. Say, for example, it was my intention to right click on this clip to scale the frame size, or I wanted to go in and replace it with an AE comp, or if it was an audio clip, maybe I wanted to adjust the audio gain. All of these are pretty common tasks. And when I go to right click on that, I either get the edit point or I get the context menu for the effects. And so for those reasons, I just wanted to point out that you have the option of going into your wrench menu and turning off the effects badges. And you can see once we've turned off the effects badge that not only do we have a little bit more of a cleaner clip, that's a little bit easier to right click on, but I also can see more of the clip name. So it's just an option where it's a little bit cleaner display of each of the clip names on your timeline. How often do you find yourself needing to find a particular clip in a timeline inside of Premiere Pro? Or maybe you even need to track down a clip depending on maybe a particular type of an effect or a LUT that was applied to it. The find function can be incredibly useful, not only for tracking down different effects, but also different clips. And it can also select all of these types of clips so that you can continue to make additional changes. Whether or not you want to remove particular effects or delete particular clips or replace a particular clip, Tracking down these individual elements in a very precise way is incredibly useful. Let's take a look. Inside of the Edit menu, we have the Find option. And you can see on Mac, the keyboard shortcut is Command F. On Windows, that would be Control F. If I come back down to my timeline, or I just make sure my timeline is active, and I press Command F, it pulls up the Find in Timeline feature. And in this feature, we can specify our own criteria to find specific clips. And you can use this to search for different types of files, different names of files, or you can use this feature to search for descriptions or comments or log notes or anything that may have been added in terms of metadata. So say, for example, here, I want to search R3D clips, and I want to go through and search the descriptions for the particular clips where the wheel was standing. And if I press Find, you can see that we actually navigate to this clip where the wheel is standing. And if I press that again and I type in flat, we navigate to a different wheel where it was laying down flat on its side. You can even go through and search by something like label or marker. Let's go in and see what happens if we search for labels that are mango. And let's choose Find All. It will find all of the clips that were matching that particular criteria. Maybe you're looking to track down a particular shoot on a particular day, or you want to track down a specific camera. Well, once you've tracked down these particular clips, it's easy to add filters or LUTs or grades. So for example, maybe you just wanted to apply a LUT to a specific camera, and you could do this as very much a batch process. Or maybe there are times when you want to remove effects or remove LUTs from a certain range of clips. There's a million different ways to use this feature, extremely powerful and useful. Let's quickly cover a couple quick tips related to navigating between edit points. In addition to using the up and down arrow keys to navigate between edit points, we'll also talk a little bit about track targeting and a useful modifier that can come in handy. I'll start by pressing the down arrow key, which will move me down to the next edit point. And likewise, I can press the up arrow key to move to the previous edit point. You may have noticed that we're only moving to the edit points on video track 1. And that's because this works according to track targeting. So if I enable video 2, you can see we'll now move to those edit points. And if I add video 3, then I'll also be navigating to those edit points as well. The one thing I wanted to point out is that you do not have to always make sure that your track targeting is set for every track. If there are times when you just want to move to all edit points, just use the shift modifier. And now you'll notice if you hold shift and you combine that with the up and down arrow keys, that it will move to the edit points on all tracks. And that includes video and audio. So if you've edited in Premiere on a Windows machine, you'll notice that by default, you can select a clip and press Shift Delete. So it just makes sense that if there are sections of your timeline that you want to select and perform a ripple delete, boom, works by default. However, if you're working on the Mac platform, this behavior varies quite a bit. If you select a clip and you press Shift Delete using the standard delete key, nothing happens. You actually have to know that the default keyboard shortcut on Mac is Option Delete. Let's take a look at the keyboard shortcuts here. And what we can see is we have two different keyboard shortcuts. One is application-wide, which is Shift Forward Delete. And by default, the timeline panel defaults to using Option Delete. Now in this case, I've gone in and added this keyboard shortcut for Shift Delete. In your case, this is what you'll see. You'll want to go in, add a keyboard shortcut. I use Shift and the standard delete key. And then when I pop back down into my timeline, I have the Shift Delete functionality mapped to the regular delete key. And in my case, this means that I also have uniformity, whether I'm working on Windows or Mac machines. So let's take a look at setting up some useful keyboard shortcuts, not only for working with keyframes, but also navigating to keyframes and selecting keyframes, and then performing additional useful things like ease operations. What I'll do to get started is I'll just quickly create some keyframes. Say, for example, I want to create some smoother fades on this clip, and I want to create fades that are a bit less linear. what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Keyframe, and we can see under the application wide menu that we have select next and select previous keyframe. And this will be application wide, so you don't need to set this per panel. But what I'm going to use is Command and Shift and N to select the next keyframe. And then I will use Command Shift and P to select the previous keyframe. And this will automatically work in the effects control panel and the timeline. While I'm in here, I'm also going to search for the ease command. For the timeline panel, we can assign Command Shift I for ease in and Command Shift O for ease out. Notice also that there are ease in and ease out commands for the effects control panel. So I will go in and also assign Command Shift I for ease in and Command Shift O for ease out. Now, if I come back into my timeline, I can use Command Shift P and Command Shift N to navigate and select keyframes directly. And once I've done that, I can use Command Shift O to ease out, Command Shift N to get to the next keyframe, and I'll ease that in. Command Shift N, I'll ease this one out, Command Shift O, and then Command Shift N to get to the last keyframe, and I will ease this one in, Command Shift I. And you'll notice that I had actually twirled down the opacity parameter in the effects control panel, so you could see what was going on as I did that directly in the timeline. But once the effects control panel is active, I can use those exact same keyboard shortcuts to perform similar actions. And once we've done that, if we want to go back into our timeline, we want to zoom in, and we want to create a little bit more of a smoother fade, and we want to drag these handles around using the pen tool, it's easy enough to do. So not only does this allow us to quickly jump from one keyframe to another, but it also selects the keyframe, which is really, really nice. All right, well, I think that pretty much does it when it comes to timeline tips and tricks. You may have noticed that I've also created a bunch of other videos related to editing workflows inside of Premiere Pro. So if you'd like to investigate other potential workflows or some of the other tips and tricks that I put together, please check them out. See you around.